thanks a lot, guys, for coming to this webinar. As I already told you, these RDF Tech Talks were supposed to be in present. Itam was going to be the host. Jerrold was going to fly from Boston. He's doing right now the LLM in Harvard. But because of this situation, I think this is the perfect timing how we can show that lawyers and any other professional provider or service provider can keep working at home with no problem using the appropriate technology. So just to give you a brief introduction, so on how did we came up with the idea of the RDF Tech Talk? Well, in Red de Firmas, we have a consulting firm. It's a legal and marketing consulting firm, and we've been organizing these events since already 2 years ago. So we started first with the electronic signatures, which was getting like a very hot topic here in Mexico. Now I think it's getting well, more important, especially right now when people cannot send files physically and they need to do everything digital. And well, last year I started a trip that I organized just to see what are the trends of legal tech around the world, which I called RDF Roadshow. And one of the stops that I made was during the Codex Fidu Law Conference of last year, and that's where I met Jerrold. Jerrold was a speaker there with another faculty member from SMU, right, Jerrold?
That was the chief executive of the Singapore Academy of Law.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Jerrold's conference was amazing. So he was definitely one of the guys that I really want to invite for doing this RDF Tech Talks. And well, I met Jerrold and some other really cool people that actually I'm going to invite them to do the next RDF Tech Talks. And some of the conclusions that we came is that not just in Mexico or in the US or anywhere around the world, the vast majority of lawyers continue to work with the same tools as Windows 95. It is just Microsoft Word, track changes, and email, and that's it. And I would say that's like probably like 95% of all the lawyers. And this makes us waste the human resources of any company, and it's very difficult to keep to stay competitive. And I think that with our current situation, more than ever, we should know how to start using technology in our work. Otherwise, the COVID-19 will rapidly run us into the ground. So this is the perfect timing how to start using technology. And I will give you just a brief introduction to both of our speakers, is Jerrold Soh and Brian Minutti. So Jerrold Soh is a full-time faculty member of the Singapore Management University and chief data scientist in Lex Quanta. He writes about the law using a mix of English, legalese, Python, and linear algebra, which sounds amazing. I actually got this profile from the Codex, from Stanford, and field legal research closest to what he writes about are law and technology, computational, empirical legal studies, and artificial intelligence law. And Brian Minutti is going to give us the introduction in this Tech Talk. Brian is a partner in Chavez, Vargas. Minutti is one of the most important firms in corporate finance, capital markets, and regulatory law in Mexico. And one of the coolest things is that Brian founded a digital ID and compliance company called Math.ai, which was recently funded by Holt Accelerator. So these are our speakers. I forgot to change the slides, I'm sorry. This is Brian, the partner of Chavez Vargas Minutti, and he's also founder of Math.ai. And well, I'm going to let them just give us a very short introduction on what they've been working on. And well, I'm going to start sharing the screen. So Brian, so you can start with your introduction. There we go. And oh, I'm sorry, you were on mute.
Okay.
There you go.
There we go, right?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Thank you, Pepe, and thank you all for giving us a little bit of your time. And I couldn't agree more with you that at least in Mexico, and I still think that somehow in other countries, lawyers, we are still far away from technology. We still are having a hard time working towards using technologies to make or work easier or home office, and this is a great great opportunity to show the world that actually it's really possible to have several tools to work as lawyers from wherever we are. In a brief introduction, basically started falling in love with technology probably like 3 years ago, and 2 years ago is when I launched Math AI, which I will speak in a few moments. And actually, also from the legal side, inside of my firm, we have been trying and using new technologies that have been helping us a lot to make our operations and our work a lot better. For example, we migrated all operations to Asana. I'm sure you guys know that tool. It's really popular, and I think it was designed by the co-founder of Facebook. And we found a great use to manage all of our deals, our legal deals by Asana. We are able to report very well to our clients. We are able to home office a lot. So I think there are a lot of opportunities for the legal world if we are willing to get to know technology. With this said, if it sounds okay, I will share my screen and I will let you know a little bit more about Math AI.
Perfect. So you guys, just before Brian shares our screen, in case you have any question, just write it on the chat, and we'll have a time at the end for Q&A, and we'll go for each for every questions. Perfect.
Okay, it's just a disclaimer. What's Math AI? Digital ID plus customer verification. Giving you a little bit of background. As Pepe was telling, one of my firms and practices is compliance and banking compliance. So for lots of years, my team and I were working with banks and fiduciaries, and we were reviewing tons of boxes and boxes and boxes of files regarding money laundering compliance and anti-bribery compliance. And I kept thinking, this is crazy. I'm getting paid to read to read 300 pages and just realize if there's an ID, a correct ID and taxpayers' numbers. So when Math AI started, we were trying to solve this paradox of how it's that identity is not mobile and how identity is always on the banking side, and why do we have to make all these compliant files over and over and over again? And usually banks have internal legal teams of 25 people or 30 or 50, and the files are still incomplete. So that's how Math AI originally started, the idea. And it evolved, and our purpose is to connect the world by allowing easier, safer human interactions through a mixture of technologies like computing, blockchain, artificial intelligence, cryptography, and all the legal expertise we have in our firm. We build an ID and document verification platform that allows our partners to build trust with their clients remotely, quickly, and safely. Math verifies identities, makes faster processes, a better use experience, and the best of all for our lawyers here, it helps us with compliance. The market has a great trust paradox. From one side, we have the typical bureaucratic legacy bank. That's a name we invented, which is bureaucratic, it's frustrating. You want to get a loan, you want to open an account, and you have to wait like 6 weeks until all your documents have been verified by 25 different areas of the bank. And on the other side, as fintechs are growing, there's the way too fast, trying to make fast loans, which is untrusty because it's hard to comply that way. So which is the sweet spot, the right spot to find compliance without even being either bureaucratic or untrustworthy. Sweet spot is really simple. What's MAD-I? From one side, we have a facial match technology, which is actually very simple. What we are doing on Sales Point with several banks right now is that facial match helps to know who is the person behind the phone, who is the person in or in the sales point, and we do a facial match with the ID, and we check that ID with government. So basically, you know that the person in front of you is actually the person corresponding to the ID in their hands. Then we have MAT Verify. MAT Verify basically uses OCR technologies, or users upload all the different documents that usually are needed, for example, for a loan, like KYC documents. OCR extracts the information, it compares the information between different documents, and verifies public documents, for example, birth certificates, national ID, tax records with public information, and verifies that the file is compliant. And mobile onboarding, it's also the way that our users, by using our app, can just take pictures of their documents, upload it to the account, so information can be verified and can be shared. An important thing here is that we've been very careful about the information and data privacy. The information that the user uploads, it's always for the user. The user can share it whoever he or she wants to, with authorizations, and all authorizations for sharing information are recorded on our blockchain. It seems simple up front, it's complex at the back. We have independent vaults, all the information that our users upload, considering it's very delicate information. It's hosted on independent vaults. We have advanced encryption, all of the servers are compliant, zero knowledge systems. This means that actually not even at MAD-I we can access your information. Only with specific authorizations for validation we can access for moments to validate the information, and after that I cannot access or know your documents. We believe that we believe that humans, we should own our information. It's delicate and only we have access to it. Always, all authorizations, access to our app, it's validated by facial recognition and by a password. After studying several layers of security, we now know that the best way to have a secure access to your documents, it's always something you have, something you know, and something you own. Something you have is your face, something you know is your password, something you own is your mobile phone. So that's the 3 layers of security that can make sure that all the information of users is safe. We have a permissioned blockchain, basically for registering every authorization, for sharing the information with banks or with other people. And we are very proud that we worked within the local authorities for a whole year, and we are the first software that has a privacy compliance certificate issued by INAI. That's a Transparency Institute in Mexico. And basically this means that the way our software is programmed is always protecting the user's information, and will by any means have breaches, or will let MAD-I that information is used improperly. We have a validated learning already in Mexico. Some of our ongoing clients are Invex Banco, which you probably know. Basically in Invex, what we are doing is that on sales points, we are doing facial match and ID validation. This has been very successful. 8% of the frauds that Invex had on sales points were because actually people were identifying themselves with IDs that they were not even their own. So as simple as this may seem, this was 8% of the fraud. Matt I was able to eliminate all that fraud. That was its costs were over $1 million a year. Also, we've been working with Smart Lending. That's a company that's placing mortgages through internet distribution channels. We are also working right now with Santander, Scotiabank on our pipeline, among other clients and sectors. We're also working on real estate sector. The beauty of digital ID is that basically when a user has its information, it's useful for anything from physical access management, which means you could use your iPhone or your Android just to access your building instead of showing your ID, to something as complex as getting a mortgage loan if you have to do a full PyGUI money laundering file. So far, as mentioned, we have the data protection certificate by the Mexican government. We were chosen among 700 companies all over the world by Holt Accelerator. Only seven companies made it to the last round and were selected in the cohort. Currently, only 3 of us stayed and were able to raise capital. At the same time, this last year, we were selected in Scotiabank First Open Innovation Program globally. We won the first place at Kaspersky Cybersecurity Startup Battle. We've gone through very hard due diligence by experts and Google Cloud partners. So it's a little bit of who we are. Where do we see digital ID? Alternative lenders, which means basically any non-banking financial institution that, at least in Mexico, has to be compliant. They need money laundering files. They do not have the amount of investments to hire a whole legal team for this. So Matt is making their life easier by making regulatory technology a big tool to make compliant files in an easy, cheap, and secure way. Also for fintechs is fast integration. Matt can be used for onboarding any kind of client. Financial institutions like Invex are actually even using us. For real estate, it will also be a very powerful tool to know leaseors and lessees. Education tech, recruit tech, procure tech, G-economy, medtech, govtech, digital ID can be placed anywhere. This is a little bit of Matai, the community of trust. I hope this is interesting for you guys, and I will wait a little bit for the question and answer part of the conference, and I will be very glad to answer any questions you guys have. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Brian. So very interesting about what are you guys doing by investing right now in softwares for your clients. I think that's your vision in your law firm. It's great. So instead just of providing legal services, you are developing your own apps that they can tackle some of the pain points that you have found in your niche, which are your clients, right? So perfect. So thanks a lot, Brian and Jerrold. Please feel free to start, and please, I already gave a little bit of the introduction of what are you doing right now, but I think it would be better if it comes directly from you. So I think you can share your screen, right? Oh, you're on mute. Let me unmute you. There you go.
All right, let me just share my screen.
I love the background. It's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, so first and foremost, I thought just like to share some of my takeaways from what Brian shared. Well, hi everyone. I think Brian's story is really quite interesting because I think he mentioned that he was a law firm partner and then he's now venturing out to build a technology company, which is super interesting. And one of the things that you realize that that's really happening is when he's talking about digital identity. It's one of those very core infrastructural things that basically nobody talks about, but it's super important. So people keep talking about machine learning and stuff. I'm not to say that's not good. I do research on machine learning, but there's a lot of things that's overlooked. I think part of my presentation as well is to try to draw everyone's attention to some of the stuff that you don't really hear about in the news, but it's really happening. It's really having a substantial impact on the legal industry, not just, I mean, all over the world. So the title of my talk is Legal Innovation in APAC, and I'll just jump straight to it soon. But first, I just wanted to say hi everyone. I hope everyone is well at this time. We are in a very interesting situation. And maybe let me introduce myself a little bit more. So I studied in Singapore. I did my undergrad law degree. So law in Singapore is an undergrad system, unlike in the US, and I think it's the same in Mexico as well, where it's undergrad. I did degree in law and also economics. So I learned some data analysis and tools from there. Then I started this company called Lex Quanta about 3 years ago now. It's basically performing data analytics, but with legal data. So if you've heard about things like outcome prediction, outcome simulation, we do stuff like what is that? Knowledge management. But how we work is we work with specific governmental or legal organizations on specific projects. So you can think about it more like a legal data consultancy. And as part of that, of course, my day job, in addition to that, is at SMU, Singapore Management University. I'm going to try and show you how it looks like, just to have everyone's screen sharing has stopped. So this is, you can see my background right now. This is not the view from my home. I am at home, but I'm just using technology as we have all been talking about. This is SMU, the actual law school. I would love to have some of you come and visit whenever you're free. But one of the things I wanted to talk about in this talk especially is how we can make use of technology, especially given the situation now, to really try new things. And it's a really exciting time, as both Brian and PP have said. So let me just get back to my presentation. And I'm going to share my screen. Yeah, so yes, for the past 2 years or so, I've been working at SMU. It's an exciting time for us right now because as a school, we've actually looked a lot at AI and AI regulation as well as legal technology. So we have, I'll share more about this later, but if anyone's interested, feel free to contact me. We have created in the last few years 2 research centers, one focusing on AI governance, and another which was just announced about 2 weeks ago, which will focus on research on legal technology and computer science and the intersection between technology and computation. So yes, that's a bit about me. I don't want to keep talking about myself. I'm just going on to the agenda for today. So I just want to do the introduction. That's done. Congrats, we've completed one thing already. Then I'll talk a little bit about why I think it's important to look at the APAC region in terms of legal innovation. One of the things that people tend to ask us is, when we did this study on legal innovation, why do we focus on this region? Like, is there even anything happening? And I'm happy to say that we found there's lots of things happening. Then from there, I want to move on to just a bit of conceptual preliminaries in exploring what is legal innovation anyway. Then where is it happening? I'll take you through some case studies of what's happening in China, what's happening in, I think, Russia, and of course focusing then on Singapore, where I know the most about. And finally, where is it going next? And this is where I tend to talk a little bit about some of the research that's coming out. And it'll be like this. So the first point again I want to make is that legal innovation in APAC is worth studying, and this is for a few reasons. So if you think about the story of 2019, like one of the key events that characterized 2019, of course, is this trade war between the US and China, and we see that there is this tension between, in the sort of almost an East meets West situation. But if you fast forward to 2020, this is the story that we have so far, right? A story about different countries and different approaches trying to deal with a new threat. Of course, the trade war is still sort of going on. There's a lot of other complications happening right now. But if you think about what's happening, you look at how China is dealing with the current situation versus how the US is dealing with the current situation. It seems like there is a shift in how global trends are likely to be from 2020 onwards. If you look at, I mean, until very recently, I was in the US. They have some trouble, to put it mildly, with this situation. Meanwhile, on the other hand, China, if you have followed the news, China has reported actually no new cases in the main area of Wuhan, which is a sign that they have really managed to get this under control. And if you project this, I think 1 year from now, you will see that assuming, and of course this is a big assumption, assuming China emerges earlier from this whole crisis, they would be in a good position really to continue with the economy, continue with technology and innovation. And so this is part of actually a larger trend to me, that when people say that China or Asia is becoming the new center of gravity of the world in terms of economy, in terms of technology, research, I'm not sure if some of you might be familiar with this person. This is Dr. Li Kai-fu, who is one of the pioneers in artificial intelligence research generally. He is best known for inventing the world's first speech recognition system. And recently, I think about 2 years ago, he published this book, essentially arguing that along many indicators, in terms of AI, China has already surpassed Silicon Valley, although we don't realize it. The number of patents, number of applications, and when we took a look at just the legal tech in China, I think this is also one of the things I was surprised to learn, that there's so much happening there that isn't really reported or covered by the media channels that we're used to looking at. So we'll get onto that soon. Now, why look at APAC? I think there are 4 reasons we can give, at least. So the conventional idea that the US is actually the center of legal tech, I think it's still very much true currently at this point, because many of the bigger startups in legal tech are from the US and they're getting lots of investments. But it's slowly getting outdated. That's the first point I will put forward. We might expect in the not too distant future that we will start to hear about big tech companies from China or other parts of the Asia Pacific really jumping into the in front of the camera as well. Now, the other thing is that many of the ideas that were born in the US, you hear of big startups like Everlaw, which just got $62 million in funding they are basically a e-discovery startup. So they're born in the US, but the idea behind whether they can scale really does depend on whether they can survive in different legal systems, right? In APAC, there are many different types of legal systems. You have civil law systems like in Mexico, you have common law systems like in Singapore and in Malaysia, and they're all very different cultural background as well. So it's an open question whether all of these things that start from the US can actually scale to the rest of the world, and whether certain ideas work in the APAC will really be a good sign of whether what the trends in legal technology to come will be. So in terms of the world's biggest legal markets, I probably don't have to say this: China, India, Russia. Of course, Australia is also a huge legal market in terms of the number of lawyers, number of work. And just get some water. So quite interestingly, they're all developing their own tech in response to local conditions. And finally, it's a land of opportunities. I think I'll share about this a bit more in about 20 slides. But Singapore has really established itself. I mean, I'm a bit biased because I'm from Singapore, but I'm saying this. It's really established itself as a legal innovation hub in a relatively short time, and I'll share a bit about what we did. I think for any country in the world, it's possible to try to replicate some of that as well. So moving on to my second point. So the first point was, why is it important to look at Asia Pacific region to begin with? Now I want to move on to my second section, which is talking about legal innovation just as a basic preliminary idea, right? And really the modest point I want to make is that legal innovation is a type of innovation. I think many of us who are legally trained tend to see law as very special. Indeed, it is very special, but that does not mean that innovation in law has to be completely different from innovation generally. And one of the things that I've learned along my legal tech journey is that there's actually a lot of rigorous innovation frameworks, people who actually practice, live and breathe innovation. You hear about design thinking, for example, that's one of the frameworks that's being put in place and leading to very good results in many organizations outside of law. And some of you might have noticed that there's now this movement of legal design thinking, as an example. So legal innovation and type of innovation. I want to talk a bit about general innovation theory. Now, some of you might know who this person is. I wonder if people know this person. This guy or this person is Joseph Schumpeter. He is a professor who is better known as being the father of innovation theory in economics. He was a professor of economics at Harvard, and he has a theory about how innovation works in the economy generally. So before I go on, one of the important points to note is that he has a PhD in law, although he's a professor of econs, which just shows that lawyers have really a lot to contribute to the world. Now, so he saw innovation as really 5 new things. Essentially, they are, I'm not going to go through all of them, but essentially we talk about new combinations of resources or new ways of doing things. So it's a very broad definition of innovation. And the innovation process, which basically has been studied quite well in economic theory, really, is that you start from basic research. You talk about theories of relativity or whatever, and then you apply it to a certain field, like maybe lasers. And then there's market research on what is actually needed, and then you commercialize. So for Schumpeter, I think one of the main points he made many important points, but one of the main points he made is that innovation is not just inventing, but there is a stage which requires you to introduce it to the market. So that is what distinguishes just some inventor in a garage versus an innovator who puts it into practice. And another important lesson that we learn from innovation theory in econs is this idea of radical versus incremental innovations. So before you see this chart, which I can actually have a pointer right here, which shows you waves of innovation. So there's a first technology here, and then the performance when it first starts out is not very good, right? It's buggy, it has lots of people don't really know how to use it, and then the performance is just like very slow in terms of efficiency and so on. But then it hits a phase where it starts to scale up, and then after a while, of course, the diminishing returns kick in and it starts to slow down again. But meanwhile, and this is the important part, meanwhile, there's some set of people developing a second type of technology that, again, it will start off not as good as the first technology. If you look at the green line, it will start off worse, but it will look as if it's never going to catch up. As usual, it will start with a very, very slow growth in product performance. But then at some point, it will start to accelerate, and then it quickly overtakes the first technology and so on. So if you just look at the dotted red line that goes at the top, this is what we observe as a market observer. Like we don't see the curves below the tops, because that's the R&D phase, that's before the news starts picking up on it. What we see is this curvy red line on top, which represents only the new technologies that have already successfully beat the existing technologies. So this is just a basic kind of way to think about how innovations work. By the time you see it being talked about, it's already been in the incubation. Okay, unfortunate choice of word here. It's already been being researched for a while now. I think slow growth and big growth. And then moving on to another theory of innovation. This is a theory of innovation that many of you might be familiar with already, so I won't go into too much detail. This is Christensen's idea of disruptive innovation. He's very famous for this idea, as popularized in his book called The Innovator's Dilemma. And essentially, you see the blue line as the innovation that existing big firms do, and typically they are called sustaining innovation. So they're trying to make, let's say, a better. If you already make cars, you want to make a better car, and it slowly increases in performance over time. Meanwhile, the disruptor, let's say an electric car and an autonomous vehicle manufacturer, would start off at a lower level of performance, but then it slowly increases to a point where customers can actually choose between the green type of product or the blue type of product, and that's where the disruptive event occurs. So that's saying a new player comes in, at first the product is not so good. Meanwhile, the incumbents will double down, continue to try to move towards high value markets using sustaining innovation, while the disruptors are making new products that initially serve low value customers, but because they start to improve over time, eventually they get to a point where you can actually displace the existing market product. So these are just basically two theories of innovation that most people talk about. First is the economist theory. The Schumpeter's theory talks about why we see this macroeconomic trend. We see big boom and bust cycles in terms of technology. Then a new technology comes in. Nowadays, we think AI is the fourth industrial revolution. Before that, you think about steam, you think about iron, things like that. Christensen's theory talks about why the existing big firms get disrupted by small firms in the microeconomic scale. So they are actually complementary and not opposed theories. And they're overlapping but distinct. The most important point is that, again, you can see incremental innovations as disruptive, incremental in the Schumpeterian sense, and sustaining innovations can also be radical, though this is less likely. Now, I think I've said all this to make one point, which is that there's more innovation than disruption. If you look at the news outlets, if you look at lots of even conferences, there's a quantity of disruption. This must be disruptive. If it's not disruptive, it's not useful. This is completely wrong. There's a lot. I think as lawyers, we all know that there's a lot of merit to what is incremental. Perhaps more so coming from a common law perspective than in civil law. But there's this idea that I think this idea that disruption is the only thing worth pursuing is a bit flawed. And given what Brian has shared just now, I think we can talk about whether that's disruptive or not, but it's actually not important. I think a core technology like digital IDs is really, really important, especially in the legal economy. So now, how do we apply these very broad theories to law? And at this point, for some reason, I have to quote another Harvard professor. So this is Professor Ron Dolan, who has a JD as well as a PhD in computer science. And he looked at both theories of innovation. He looked at Christensen's theory of innovation, and then said that, well, actually, there is a middle ground. You don't have to have completely disruptive innovation in law because there are some barriers to entry for new startups. It's not as if they can simply come in and start disrupting however they want. There are, for many reasons, professional who can practice law, what lawyers can and cannot do. There are also good efficiency reasons, if you think in terms of an economics perspective, on why big law firms exist. So the upshot is that it's not so simple as, oh, will there be a disruptive event to law or not? As an alternative, I think this is a good middle ground to think about. Professor Dolan actually proposes this idea of adaptive innovation, not disruptive, not incremental, but adaptive, in the sense that there's a bit of some elements of the classic innovator's dilemma. You see that big law firms are in some areas doubling down on higher value clients, trying to upscale their resources, upscale their services. But at the same time, it's not as if they are completely ignoring the new technologies that are coming out. You see lots of big firms also talking about starting incubators, starting new technology arms to try to adapt some of these new innovations in the market. Okay, so this is the rest of my second point, that legal innovation is a type of innovation. We can think about legal innovation using some of the tools that's developed outside of in general innovation theory outside of the law. And of course, we can think about how that applies then to the law itself. Okay, right. Now the third point is that legal innovation is ubiquitous, or it's very commonplace. And this is where I would share a little bit about some of the research that we've done at SMU in collaboration with the Singapore Academy of Law, which is kind of like a government legal organization here. And we looked at legal innovation in 5 areas. So if you think about innovation, it's a very broad, very big word. People are trying to throw it around. I've tried to define it for you in the earlier few slides, but I think when I look at innovation and law, I think of it in 5 different areas. So first, there's the technology, which is what everyone talks about, and then there is the business process, what law firms are doing. There is dispute resolution, what the courts are doing, education and regulation. Excuse me. It's a bit dry today for some reason. Yeah, so we looked at these 5 areas, and we also got people from each country to contribute across APAC. We actually surveyed 10 different countries. I used to be able to say all of them by memory, but I think basically there's India, Russia, China, Hong Kong, Japan, Korea, Singapore, Malaysia, Australia, and a snapshot about the US. So these are all the countries that we've covered. And we focus on APAC, which is defined quite broadly to include the United States. One of the things I've learned is that the United States is indeed considered technically part of APAC under the Pacific half of Asia Pacific. Anyway, so I'll provide a link to the report at the end, so don't worry about it. And one caveat before I proceed is that this is info from 2019. As you know, this field is moving very fast. 2019 feels like many years ago. And there's a new study underway for this year. And let me know if anyone. So here's the landscape, a very brief landscape of how it looks like to me. Let me explain this graph. This captures most of the countries that we've studied. And I've plotted them on 2 axes. The first axis, the vertical axis, talks about the openness of the legal sector. Now, it's to be clear, the openness doesn't mean how open people are to new ideas or whatever. It's the idea of openness here is used in a very strict sense in saying that how open the specific regulations in the legal industry in that country is to new technologies. So if there are very strict laws against anyone who is not licensed doing anything related to law at all, then it's less open. Whereas if you have a regulatory sandbox, you have kind of essentially a blank check for people to come in and do something cool with the law, then it's more open. The second axis is size, and I'm talking about the size here, not of the economy, not of the population, but the size of the legal market. Right. So here's where this is a very rough. I mean, there's no exact mathematical measurement to it. This is just a very rough plot of where things stand based on what we've done, based on the research we've done. And last thing, the size of the circle, the size of the dotted line circle, reflects the amount of innovation that we generally see coming out of each of these countries. So there are essentially 3 clusters of countries. You will see that there are countries which are very small, like Hong Kong. Okay, I should use the word jurisdiction when I refer to Hong Kong. There are very smaller jurisdictions like Hong Kong and Singapore, which have made the decision to be very, very open about the legal landscape. Partly because they realize that the legal market is not going to be fueled by internal demand, so it's important to be open for foreign players to come in and to serve as a platform. At the bottom left of the diagram, you see jurisdictions like Malaysia and Korea, which are kind of, in a sense, undecided. They are not so large in market size, not so open in regulations. But I'll talk a little bit about how in these 2 countries like Malaysia and Korea, because size doesn't point in any clear way of where to go with regards to legal tech. They are actually having a lot of consultation and debate about whether they should relax legal professional rules to allow for more innovation. And meanwhile, then the third cluster is most of the economies with big legal markets, whole range of openness, but you see that because of the strong internal demand, there's a lot of technologies, a lot of legal tech startups trying to satisfy the internal demand. So I'm going to highlight a few countries. I think what everybody is probably interested in is China. So China has really, when we looked at China, really, we saw too many examples of legal technology, and we couldn't actually write about all of them. So here are just a few, like maybe not even 10% of all the different notable legal tech startups. I mean, it's all in Mandarin, so they are covering a lot of different use cases. You think about, there's an IP blockchain, there's an internet court, there are legal analytics, there is legal marketplaces. I mean, anything you can think of in terms of legal tech, there's an app in China for that. I think honestly I can say that. So I'll give you some examples. This is a website from China. It's called yingler.com. In Chinese, it means you've already won.com. And essentially, it is a marketplace for you to get legal services. All these are, this is an actual screenshot of the website. All these are, of course, lawyers. There's a similar service. I'm not sure whether about in Mexico, but in US, there's a similar service called Council, which recently closed down, unfortunately. But this is the idea of a legal marketplace. Some people who are more concerned about this call it the Uber for lawyers. It's not a very nice label, but this is one of the bigger players that we've seen. And then there's this idea of Pocket Lawyer, which is an app. And the thing to note about China, of course, is that there are big tech companies in China, Tencent and Alibaba, and the app, if you heard of it, called WeChat, which is maintained by Tencent, really permeates almost every part of Chinese life. You can buy air tickets, you can buy food, you can chat. It's a social media app as well. So they're very used to having everything on the phone, including now law. So Pocket Lawyer literally means you have a lawyer in your pocket. This is one of the services I've took as a screen grab from their website. It roughly translates to, the Chinese name is 律师帮你说, which translates to the lawyer helps you say it. So if you look at the top left, it's not just for legal disputes, actually. If you have an argument with somebody and you want a lawyer to help you say this in a more professional way, you can engage the services of a lawyer to help you, perhaps not threaten, but persuade the person you're arguing with to give you what you want. So I raised this example not because it's cool. I mean, it is cool, but to also show that with mobile apps and mobile legal apps, you can think of new ways of delivering legal services. You can have on-demand, literally on-demand services that you're being able to provide to the client literally from out of his or her pocket. Now, there's another example of this interlegal organization blockchain. I mean, this is really just a way for IP filings to be done in China using the blockchain. I mean, this is just because people like to talk about blockchain, so I just want to blockchain thing in. Now, and this I think will be of interest to people, the WeChat courts. They've been around, I think, for 3 or 4 years now, and I have no doubt that given the situation today, this has proven very useful. Essentially, you can have your entire dispute from filing to execution to adjudication to the transfer of the remedies, all on WeChat. So WeChat, I think, for those who are not familiar, it's like Line, it's like WhatsApp. And it's super interesting to think about how you can have an entire court, an entire process just adjudicated through the phone. And I'll talk a little bit more about this idea of online dispute resolution when we come to Singapore's case later on. So moving on from China, now we look at Australia, which I won't spend too much time on. Australia is another big legal market characterized by internal demand rather than external demand. So you'll see that in Australia, there's a lot of big firms, big players coming in to try to start legal tech initiatives. So these are all actually big players, not small firms, not startups. PwC, as many of you would know, Elevate is one of the world's biggest legal process outsourcing. So the contributor who wrote the chapter on Australia for us describes Australia as a hyper-competitive market, but it's hyper-competition within the big law firms to try to out-innovate one another. And this, I think, can be explained by the fact that we have a very strong internal demand. So there's really a lot to fight for. Now, just moving quickly on to Russia. Like, I think a lot of us don't hear about Russia much because most of the stuff is in Russian. But when we took a look there, we realized that it's very similar to China, but maybe about one or 2 years behind in terms of the number of legal tech companies. But there's really still a lot going on. So here are some examples. You have this, what they call the Bravo card, which is a card which you can prepay for legal services. So Bravo means law in Russian. And you can characterize this as a kind of payment model innovation in the business parlance. Here's an example of what different levels of the card would give you. So you realize that there is many ways to think about innovation. You can think about business model innovation. You can think about payment services innovation. There's a lot of stuff going on in Russia as well. This is another example of a legal marketplace. Basically, it's a website that allows you to just ask a question online. And it tells you even that 328 lawyers are ready to answer now, literally now. If you want the answers, you get it now. Yes. So now I want to talk a little bit about Hong Kong. The main story there is this. I mean, before a lot of this happened, this was the situation there. The Belt and Road Initiative, which is one of the largest trade networks to be built in the modern world. When we look at Hong Kong, we realize that a lot of the initiatives are characterized by this Belt and Road. So you have online Belt and Road arbitration model, the eBrams or HK, and when they have had a few hackathons, and even with the hackathons, the theme of the hackathon is to have the Belt and Road Justice Challenge. So look, there's some there's beginning of quite interesting stuff that's happening in Hong Kong. And I'm really looking forward to what we'll see this year from our contributors. All right, so now to Singapore. When it comes to Singapore, I'll talk a little bit more about this simply because I know more, not because it's the better or anything, but we have what the government has called a whole of government, whole of legal system effort at pushing legal tech forward. And what this means really is that you have innovation in all the areas, and people are trying to work together to push this through. It's quite interesting. So I'll start with the idea of regulation. In regulation, you might have heard of this program that's run by the Singapore Academy of Law. It's called the Future Law Innovation Program, where they have a number of workshops, there's an incubator, there's a series of events for lawyers to participate in, and law firms can be part of the program as well. And it's just all meant to educate lawyers on existing technologies, also to facilitate lawyers with innovating with new technologies. So one of the sort of success stories that the Future Law Innovation Program usually talks about it's a really simple one, but I really like it because it's simple. It is how they helped a lawyer start to work in a co-working space. Now, for those of you who are practicing law, you will know that there might be problems with law firms being in a co-working space because you have client confidentiality obligations. You have to keep the documents in a separate office. At least that's the law in Singapore. And if you're in a co-working space and your documents there's no specific cabinet to keep your documents safe, it's actually a big problem. So one of the law firms who wanted to be part of this innovation actually had to petition to the Ministry of Law to allow him and allow them to work in the co-working space so that he can be next to startups, he can be next to other companies that he serves. And the ministry actually made an exception for this person with the help of the Future Law Innovation Programs people as well. And then that model was used as a success, as a precedent for other law firms who wanted to work in co-working space as well. So this is just a really, really kind of incremental innovation that I think leads to significant differences. Now, technology, there are two firms that I would mention here. Zigo, formerly known as Dragon Law, is basically a contract generation and templates app and also a platform. They were initially located in Hong Kong, but because of favorable conditions created by the Singapore government for them, I suppose, they joined the Future Law Innovation Program, and then they relocated lots of their operations to Singapore. Luminance, as many of you might know, is a due diligence and contract review legal AI company that comes from the US. But they've also set up substantial operations in Singapore, especially a sales office, following some of the efforts by the Future Law Innovation Program, which is FLIP for short, I call it FLIP. In terms of business processes, we talk about what law firms are doing. You might have heard of Create 65. This is a legal tech initiative by Clifford Chance, one of the Magic Circle law firms. Create 65, it's called 65 because plus 65 is the Singapore telephone number code for the international dial. And let me just check the chat, see what's going on. Yes, thanks PP for putting the link. And they've actually had a wave of, taken in one wave of startups. I think they're looking to take in a second wave for the incubator program right here in Singapore. And one of the things that really brought them into Singapore was a partnership with the Singapore government, as well as a lot of involvement from the FLIP program as well. Allen and Overy has this incubator program called Fuse, which is in a sense similar to what Clifford Chance is doing with Create 65. They've also taken one batch of startups from Singapore as well. And now dispute resolution. I have more to say about this in a minute, but I just want to point out that the court, the Supreme Court of Singapore, as well as the state courts, are all also very invested in legal innovation. So the Supreme Court has created a new office called the Office of Technology and Innovation. Office of Technology and Innovation. Basically, there is a Chief Technology and Innovation Officer sitting in the Supreme Court, and he has jurisdiction over all the legal tech projects in the whole legal system. So in fact, he even oversees what's happening in the state courts. And he has one or two assistants. The office is quickly expanding right now. They're hiring, actually. And what that has done is it's really provided one way to coordinate a lot of different legal innovation efforts across the courts. I mean, I've spoken to the chief tech officer, I think a few months ago, and he was like, I have 56 projects going on right now. A lot of them have overlaps. I'm trying to see how I can make them synergize better to avoid double work, to help people out with some of the projects that they're doing, and they don't know actually that somebody else is doing the exact same thing, that they can work together. And this is all just within the court system. And now finally, education, I must say this, I must raise the fact that law schools are not just sitting by and watching it happen. So there are 3 law schools in Singapore, just 3. Might be surprising to you because from my understanding, there are like 1,000 law schools in Mexico. I studied at National University of Singapore. And now I work at the Singapore Management University. So both are very good schools. I'm not going to say which is better. But both have actually created research centers for technology, innovation, AI, and law. So do some of the fundamental research on this. So if you're interested, you can just Google NUS AI and law, SMU AI and law. You'll see some of the efforts that we're putting out recently. Okay, so just to sum up some of the key findings from our APAC Innovation Report. First thing, I will just go back to the first point. It's everywhere. Legal innovation is ubiquitous. There are different types of innovation: business model innovation, technology, in the courts, so on. And there are some common use cases you will see across the world. Yeah. So just adjusting my screen a bit. So many are actually incremental. You know, it's not something that will disrupt the whole legal system tomorrow. Unlike what many news outlets like to say, no one's getting replaced by robots 100%. it's just document generation, marketplaces, and some are disruptive. It could take a while. After a while, they might actually displace some of what existing law firms are doing. But there are many that are just trying to improve what current law firms are already doing. And I would sum it up by thinking about each of these countries in terms of the two axes: the size of the legal market and the openness of the legal regulation. There are other characteristics, of course, that explain why different countries have responded differently to legal innovation, but I won't go into that for now. So some thoughts on ODR. I heard that this is a hot topic right now. I mean, Richard Susskind, of course, has published a new book on ODR, which I have yet to fully read, but he's a big advocate of ODR. And given the current situation, ODR seems to be the only type of dispute resolution that many countries have anyway. So as the name suggests, dispute resolution, online dispute resolution as well. Well, dispute resolution, of course, but online. But is it? And that's just where it starts to get interesting. So we see a lot of examples across the world. I've just talked about the WeChat courts in China. In Singapore, we're trying to have ODR systems for almost everything. There's the small claims tribunal system. So for small claims, which are claims below a certain amount, I think it's $5,000, you can do it all online now. And there's an employment tribunal system that's being tested. There's a motor accident injury claim system that is being developed. I'm working on this. My startup's actually working on this system, so I know a bit about what's happening behind the scenes. Unfortunately, I can't share too much because of confidentiality obligations. But basically, it's been announced. It's going to be. In fact, it's already gone live, but some of the features have not been fully implemented yet. So this is a system for people to, if you're injured in a motor accident, you can just settle the whole claim system online for your pain and suffering damages, for anything. In the future, there are plans to extend this system to the family justice system. So disputes over maintenance, disputes over divorce settlements, for example, can be done online. So when we talk about ODR, there's always two opposing views, which is putting it online is going to lead to a second class or cheaper kind of justice. You hurry for justice, right? And the other point of view is that, well, but it's better than nothing. If you delay it too long, you are denying justice. And this is, of course, two maxims that people always talk about. And I think we can talk about whether it's good or bad, but right now everyone's going online. This is the fact of life as it is. And the next point is, well, if we look at this, if we try to unpack this idea of justice, well, we're talking about who are we talking about justice for? When we think about ODR, we tend to say, okay, if somebody is currently having a lawyer going through the court system, and if you now put that person online for online dispute resolution, it would obviously seem as if the level of justice he or she gets is to courts because maybe they are having the whole. Then the framing, this different framing really changes view. We're talking about justice to a group of people, really not even underserved at all. And I think this is the essential point. There are actually a few levels of getting online. For level 1, you have online databases. This was what's happening in the 1980s. You have your case law, you have regulations all becoming websites. Level 2 is filings. Singapore went through this situation in the 1990s. You see? And the last, of course, is online forums, which is, by forums I mean, of course, the dispute resolution forum. So there's a few levels, and what I want everyone to think about right now is, what's the next step? What's level 4? What happens the next 10 years after all of these these online dispute resolution systems are built, right? What would the next wave of young and impressionable lawyers think would be inefficient about the legal system and try to improve? So I think the point I want to make here is that ODR isn't just courts with websites, just like how a tech company isn't just a supermarket that now has a website that sells goods. The traditional approach in law, I think, I'm not sure whether this is the same in Mexico, but in Singapore, definitely the regulators think this way. It is that, well, offline and online should be the same thing. There shouldn't be any difference. If a contract is formed by offline acceptance offline, it should also be formed by offline acceptance online. Well, this is a very sound approach for making the law itself. But I think it's different when we're talking about how to practice law. Because in practice, when you think about online dispute resolution, it brings a whole host of different opportunities and also challenges, to be sure. So you can think about things like, how do I integrate ODR systems with analytics, judge analytics, outcome analytics, which I will talk about in a few moments. And one point to note, which is what is really exciting to me as a data analyst really, is that once you have all of these disputes going online, anything that's online is very easy to track in terms of the database. Putting privacy concerns aside, of course, this means that a court operating an ODR system will suddenly have all this data on who's getting involved in disputes, what's the average number of people who are settling cases, how much are they settling for, where accidents happen, for example, what are the types of accidents that people can't settle. All of this information is suddenly going to be made available to anyone who knows how to use it properly. And it will be a huge pity if courts don't do it well, but it's also a great opportunity to really expand our information on the level of justice that's out there in society. Because right now, most of the stuff we have to go by is just cases that, in a sense, very wealthy individuals or very well-resourced companies fight. We have very little information on actually the day-to-day claims of the general population. And ODR systems would be able to change that, which is exciting to me. Of course, data, as many people have said, is this new fuel for AI, for machine learning, and everything. So that's wraps up the third part, which is this idea that legal innovation is ubiquitous. I'll talk a bit about ODR. And the last part is how legal innovation will continue. So one thing I want to say is that behind every legal tech startup, there is a research paper. We've seen this diagram earlier. It's the process that Schumpeter pointed out for how invention becomes innovation. So invention is basic research, and it goes through market commercialization to become actually innovation that has real consequences on the world. So if you look at I've studied the trajectory of a lot of legal tech innovations. If you look at what was happening in 2017, about 3 years ago, most of the commercialized legal technologies were based on year 2000 research. So you're talking about really like none of this recent wave in artificial intelligence or machine learning was even applied yet. In 2018, you see more basic machine learning research being applied to law. You might have heard of this thing called natural language processing, which has had a lot of advancements recently. And once that was published, the pace of adoption by legal tech companies was really quick. So many companies started to incorporate all this new research. Now in 2019, which was last year, what I noticed is that this applied machine learning and law research begins to go quite mainstream. So lots of people are looking at some of the research that is being done in the AI conferences, trying to apply that to law. So I'll just try to illustrate how this timeline looks in more detail. I focus on analytics because that's where I know the most, but I think it does apply a bit generally as well. So this idea of legal outcome prediction is not new. The idea being using analytics to try to predict the outcome of a case. If you go all the way back to the 1957, there was already an article that says, well, I can predict Supreme Court decisions mathematically. If you read the article, it's not as impressive as it sounds. He looked at 14 cases, and then he wrote some equations. But of course, this was, I think, 57, so that's really way ahead of its time. If you fast forward about 50 years, this was a very influential paper in the field, where essentially a team of political scientists, some with legal training, tried to forecast how the US Supreme Court will decide. And they did two things. First, they created a statistical model that looks at political science factors. So what do they mean by political science factors? Really, it's as simple as what was the direction of the lower court decision? Was it liberal or conservative? How many liberal or conservative judges are there in the Supreme Court right now? It's a bit more sophisticated than that, but that was the essence of the idea. And they were trying to predict, well, can I predict better using just political science factors than legal factors? So separately, they got a team of lawyers, legal experts, to read the cases, to analyze the law in accordance with legal analysis, and to predict how the Supreme Court will vote in future cases. And what they found is that the political science statistical model was able to predict the Supreme Court decision with, like, I think it was 72.9% accuracy. And meanwhile, the legal approach had about 67.7% accuracy, I think. So of course, if you're only interested in trying to figure out where the Supreme Court will vote, without any concern about what kind of laws it will make and so on, it seems like all you need to do is to figure out whether it's liberal or conservative. I mean, there's a lot of views we can express on that, but I won't go into too much detail here. Now, moving on, about another 10 years, this idea of predicting judicial decisions was applied in another influential paper looking at the European Court of Human Rights. And for this, they did not look at political science factors at all. What they did, they took the text of the judgments, they just took out the facts portion and the applicable law portion, they threw it into a machine learning model and told it to try to identify whether the case there was a rights violation found in the case or no rights violation found in the case. And again, it was about, I think, 72% accuracy. So there's a natural progression here from very relatively unsophisticated techniques to simple statistical techniques to now a bit more complicated and sophisticated machine learning techniques. Fast forward, this is another paper that uses a general approach. So it's not just political factors anymore. And this is published in the mainstream computer science journal. Now, the difference between these papers that I'm showing you here and the papers that I referenced in the previous slide is that these are all done by actual computer scientists, not political scientists, not legal. So what this means is that the computer scientists are really looking at legal with a lot of interest. And to me, this is a signal that we are going to see an increase in the amount of commercializable legal tech research in the years to come. So, special mention for China, as I think one of the stories I'm trying to tell here is that China is really quite forward beyond what most people realize in terms of legal innovation. They have a competition for predicting the outcome of Chinese courts. And you can go to this website, you can download the data directly, and you get 110,000 cases, because China's jurisdiction is huge. That's already in nicely structured format that you can run machine learning on. And this is only, in fact, the beginning, because subsequently there's a lot of other new data sets from China that have come out for legal AI training. Here's a snapshot of something that's related but different. It's an idea that some of you might be familiar with called judge analytics. In Westlaw, in Lexis, you will see that right now you have most big legal publishing companies now have a feature for you to look at, oh, how many motions did this court or this judge grant? And the idea is that by looking at how many motions of this type, you might be able to say, oh, well, this judge is probably favorable to this type of thing or not. I have a lot of hesitation on that kind of thinking, to be honest. But there's no doubt that more research into this will continue. So here is a snapshot of some of the research I've been doing. If you are familiar with the domain name dispute system, some of the research I've been doing is in this regard. What you see before you is a heat map of judges and outcomes and years. So it's a bit small, I apologize for this. But on the, please get the pointer out. On the vertical axis here, draw a straight line. On the vertical axis, each is a judge, an ID of a particular judge or a panelist. And on the horizontal axis here is the year. So this is 2000, 2001. Now, how green or how red the squares are signifies how many motions that particular judge heard in that year that was granted in favor of the plaintiff or the complainant. So in the UDRP, or sorry, in the domain name dispute system, it's a very relatively simple system where a complainant tries to sue a respondent for control over a domain name. And one of the big debates in that area is whether there are certain arbitrators who are partial towards certain groups of people. Right? I think this is a big concern in many areas of arbitration as well. And if you look at this diagram, what you would notice immediately is that there are a few people who seem to stand out from others. This panelist, for example, is consistently red, whereas this panelist is consistently dark green. So it means that if I'm a complainant and I get to choose, assuming I get to choose, I would want to choose this person. If I'm a respondent, I would want to choose this person. But that being said, there's a lot that this analysis does not address. And I think some of you might have reservations as well, which are very well founded. The fact is that we are not accounting for what's happening in those cases. It's possible that the cases which this person hears over time just happens to be a lot of cases where the complainant brings a very weak case. And perhaps you can also think, once in the early years, if let's say in the first year of this person's tenure as a panelist, as an arbitrator, he or she grants more motions to the respondent. In future years, respondents with stronger cases would tend to choose this person to adjudicate disputes as well. So then it continues the trend over time. So what I'm trying to say here is that it's not actually enough to just look at all of these very basic statistics to conclude about whether any person has a particular type of bias or whether a system is biased or not. However, this I think is being done. So like I said, Westlaw and Lexis now have this judge analytics thing. There are startups that are doing it. What I'm trying to do in this research is not to say anyone is biased. I'm trying to figure out what is a more statistically robust way of accounting for the facts of the cases that appear before individual judges. So this is a work in progress here, but I thought I'd just share it with you. So to sum up this part, the research runway is long. There is a lot of basic research in machine learning that is not yet applied to law. A lot of applied research in this field that I work in, called law and AI or computational legal studies. It has not yet been commercialized. And there are a lot of commercialized research that has not been imported to APAC. I'm not sure about the situation in Mexico, to be honest, but my guess is that there's a lot of runway for innovation as well. And given that there's so much commercial support, so much government interest, at least in Singapore, I think the research will continue. It will continue. There will be computer scientists coming in. You will see research coming out of China, of different APAC countries. So this will continue, I think it's safe to say. So where are we now in terms of legal innovation and technology? So going back to this diagram I showed much earlier on the 3 waves, on technological waves, the first wave, I think you can think of it as libraries and digests. You know, we had a lot of cases, and then we started to realize that we're going to make sense of all these cases, and we put them into libraries. Then we moved them onto online legal databases. And now to make sense of this information even more, we have this new wave called legal analytics, which is all trying to make sense of the legal innovation that we have. Sorry, the legal information that we have. And just to recap, so this brings me to the end of the talk. Just to recap, first, again, hope everyone is well. I think that's important. Second point I made is that the legal innovation in APAC is worth paying attention to because of the legal diversity in this area, and of course, because of the huge growth potential. Perhaps the same can be said of Latin America, I'm not sure. Legal innovation is a type of innovation. We can use theories of innovation generally, frameworks of innovation like design thinking, to inform how we analyze and think about legal innovation. Innovation in the law, yes. Legal innovation is everywhere. It's especially outside of the US. So it would be a mistake to think that all we need to pay attention to is the US. And last point is that legal innovation will continue as more and more data becomes available. When we get ODR systems, when we get better ways of capturing legal data, as more research gets done, it's going to continue on all around the world. So thank you. This is the link for the report, as I mentioned. I think the slides, I will be happy to share them anyway, so no worries, but you can just copy it as now if you want. A second thing I've included is for those who are interested in the academic side of things. The first natural legal language workshop was conducted last year. I attended the workshop. Some interesting papers are there, and here are my contacts. So yes, back to you, Vivi. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, Jerrold. It was a very interesting talk. I really appreciate all your times and also for all the people that were here. And so we are going to start with the Q&A section. So we had a couple of questions right now, and there was one from Jorge. Actually, so what I'm going to do, guys, is that I'm going to unmute your microphone so you can just, well, first, for who is going to be the question, and then we can just start answering all the questions. So we have a question from iPhone de Jorge, well, Jorge, and then there was another from Joaquin Vega, and the last one was from Angel. So in case you guys have any other question, just put them on the chat, and I'm going to mute your microphone so you can ask your question to either of the three of us. So Jorge, there you go. Hello, Jorge, can you hear us? I guess. Well, the question was, how do they do customer interviews for AML? I think, well, that was one of the first questions. I think that was for you, Brian. Jorge was asking, how do they do customers interviews for AML? Jorge, I'm not sure what's AML. That your microphone is already on mute. So in case you want to ask the question, please. Oh, there you go. Now we can hear you.
Sorry, anti-money laundering.
No problem. Oh, anti-money laundering. Okay, perfect. And that question was to Brian?
Yeah, of course, for Brian.
So perfect, Brian. So Jorge is asking, how do you do customer interviews for anti-money laundering with Mati.ai? And I'm going to unmute you. There you go, Brian. Yes.
Yeah, well, basically, Matt AI is an ecosystem that gives you a direct way of communication with the client. So once the client is onboarded through the app to Mad AI, the company or bank or whoever requires this information can just solicit that information to the customer, or in the case, these several questions you usually need for KYC, you can just put them into any ad hoc template, so the user will receive them, answer them, and deliver them to the company. In this case, the added value is that by facial recognition, you know that the user is behind the phone, it's answering those questions, and before sending the question template or documents to the company, again, facial recognition will use this to authorize. It's kind of a facial signature. We'll send the information, and this will get recorded on the blockchain as a registry that user sent that information, that those answers for those questions on and certain date and certain hour. I hope that's helpful.
Perfect. So thanks a lot, Jorge. In case you have, was that? Oh, sorry. Let me unmute you. Well, I think we have some technical problems, but yes. So we may go ahead with the next question, which was from Joaquin Vega. I think Joaquin Vega. I think he left. But anyways, I'm going to read it. And that was for me. It's Pepe. What is the business model that a law firm can adopt to use this sort of text? Just by means of recommending to a client as an implementing selling agent, or law firms should just assume there is no space for them on this low-level, high-volume type of work? Well, maybe that was a question for the three of us. So we are three lawyers and have also our side business. Well, not me. I don't have a law firm, but I would say that, well, it depends. Like if you want to develop your own software, like Brian did, like the thing that you have to do is just try to find your market niche, right? Which are the pain points that you're going to solve. Because one of the main things on this startup ecosystem is that people really don't care about your technology. They just care about what are the necessities and the requirement that your software is going to solve them. Because if you don't solve any problem, maybe if you invest $10 million on the best AI technology, nobody is going to buy it. And if you don't have any clients, then you won't have any cash flow and your company will just go bankrupt. And you can also do a sales agent. Actually, what we do in Red de Firmas, we are the partners of Agiloft. It's a contract and commercial lifecycle manager. And so what we do is that we are resellers for the licenses, and then we do the implementations and the configuration of the software for the operation of the companies. And that's another business model that it's actually going really good for us, because I mean, you don't have to rediscover the wheel. If there are softwares that you can implement and there is a market, like in Mexico, like in Singapore, and all the countries that Jerrold was talking about, I think you can do both ways. And on the third part of the questions, no, I don't agree. I think lawyers, there's a really big market. There's a lot of pain points that we all lawyers have, especially what I say at the beginning of this conversation. Lawyers still work with Windows 95 tools, and we all work super slow. And you have to remember that lawyers are the main assets in a law firm, which is if you look at it as a business, right? So what are you selling is their time. And how do you use their time efficiently? Well, you have to know if there's a lot of paperwork and a lot of activities that do not provide any added value to your clients, and that you can automate with a software, with a system, with artificial intelligence. I think that's another way on how you can focus. I don't know, Brian or Jerrold, would you like to answer a little bit further on this?
Well, from my side, I think you were very accurate. an important thing in the technology world is to understand that there are already many technologies out there, and leveraging those technologies can be quite easy. Usually, at least in my point of view from the lawyers sector, we are not competing on developing the best technology. We are competing to understand the best application of many existing technologies. So as we understand our day-by-day job, and we have to know where's actually where we add value. We do not add value by transcripting a document for 6 hours. We do not add value just by part of what my story at Matayo. We don't add value just by sitting with a bunch of documents and reading one by one. So if we understand that many technologies out there can help us do that, you can just leverage that technology and deliver better services to your clients at an important, better costs, because you're using your main asset, that is lawyers, for the most fundamental work at your firm, and not at other activities that nowadays can be done with technology. And for example, many companies, they invest thousands or $100,000 just to make their in-house CRM for customers, when there's so many tools that you can just buy for a couple bucks a month, right? That's an example. So
exactly.
Basically, I don't think you need to make huge investments in technology to do your legal service. To tech your legal service, you need to know the pains of your customers. You need to know what technologies are out there, and just leverage them and apply them intelligently.
Perfect. Jerrold, would you like to add something? Oh, sorry. I got you mute. I think you can mute yourself actually, Jerrold, because you are on mute. Oh, there you go.
Oh yeah. Hi everyone. So I'm going to give a very lawyer's answer to this. I'm going to say it depends. It depends on what kind of firm you're talking about. Are you a big firm? Are you a small firm? What area of law? And what you hope to achieve. So basically, we've looked at a lot of different examples of firms trying to, in a sense, get a slice of the legal tech market, and many people have different strategies. So there are firms that are trying to develop their own technologies. So they're going to become a producer of technology. There are also firms that have outsourced building technologies and are trying to resell them so they have set up a platform for startups to put technologies on that platform to reach out to their lawyers. There are other firms that are, in a sense, as what you mentioned, in a sense, becoming an implementing or selling agent. So the example I can give you is, you buy a software like Luminance or Kira Analytics. You put in your firm's precedents, documents, train the model. Your firm's model will be different from every other law firm's model because you've put in your own data into it. And people are marketing themselves on having the best Kira model out there to their clients. So their due diligence machine learning is better than somebody else's. But they are not building their own models. They're using a platform, what people start to call machine learning as a service models. So there are all different strategies. I wouldn't say there's one right answer. Again, it does depend on what you're hoping to achieve, what your firm is comfortable with doing. I mean, what's most fun for you as well. And to address the second part of the question, should law firms assume that there is no space for them on this low-level, high-volume type of work? I don't really have an answer to this, but something comes to mind when I read this part of the question, which is this example of IBM. I think it was 30 years ago when IBM was a company that essentially just sold mainframes to big companies, right? And the head of IBM said, well, nobody will ever need a personal computer. Why would individuals need this kind of high volume, low level type of computer? We'll focus all on mainframes business. But look where we are now with personal computing being the norm rather than the exception. So I think it's probably not as simple as, can law firms just not do this completely, or can they do this? Sorry to rephrase. It's not as simple as law firms simply just cannot participate in high volume, or law firms can participate in high volume, low level type of work. It's really a matter of, do you want to do it? do you have the ability to do it? And you can go on and I guess do it. So yeah, that's all I have to say.
And also, it's not easy. It's not easy to get to the correct solution. Like you have to go out of the building and start to ask people and try to sell it, because there's no business if you have no clients. If you just have an idea or a project, man, you still like, there's a long way until you can find a business. The first thing that you have to focus is just which are the necessities or the pain points that you're going to solve, and try to find clients. And it's going to be hard. It's going to take a lot. You have to contact hundreds and hundreds of people. You're going to get a lot of no's, but if you keep going and you keep improving your service or your product, I think you can develop a really good business. So before I jump to the next question of Angel, I just paste the link that we published actually for this Tech Talk. And in case you guys found this webinar interesting, it will mean the world to me if you could just share this link in your LinkedIn profile. If you could put your reviews in this as a comment in this post in LinkedIn, it will really help us to continue doing these webinars for the upcoming months. And any kind of feedback will be really well received. So I'm going to pass the voice to Angel. So Angel, I'm going to mute your microphone and please go ahead.
Hi, hello, Pepe, Brian, Jerrold. Thank you so much for this webinar. It was really interesting, and obviously thank you so much considering the current situation to give this talk online to everyone. So Jerrold, my question goes to you. Do you consider that a key question to generate innovation in the legal industry is why do people hire a lawyer, whereas there are software companies that replicate the work of a lawyer at a lower cost and even better quality?
Oh, I think you are still mute, Jerrold. There you go.
All right, thank you for the question. I think it's a very good question. I will answer it in two parts. So I'll deal with the first part. Whether it's a good question to ask why do people hire a lawyer? And I think absolutely it's a great question to ask when we're thinking about legal innovation. And I think it's a very good question because it helps us start to empathize with what do people really want when they're hiring a lawyer, right? They don't want software. I think they're not hiring a lawyer because they want software. They're not hiring a lawyer because they want to file documents. They want to hire a lawyer because they're looking for solutions to problems that they have, whether or not it's a legal problem or not a legal problem. And the fact that if you focus on asking that question, which you suggested, I think it helps us think about different use cases for law. Like when people hire a lawyer for divorce, it's very different from when people are hiring a lawyer for a contract or a transaction. What you're looking out for, why do people hire a lawyer? These situations are all different, right? When you talk about family law, I suppose there is more of the expectation of wanting some human element involved. Whereas if you talk about a big company just trying to get a contract done, I don't think they really are interested in whether just the human touch itself might not be the main consideration. So in fact, this question of why is one of the key questions that we ask when we try to apply design thinking to solve the problem. The idea being, let's first understand the problem, understand what users actually really want when they are looking at this thing. So it's a very powerful tool. And so as you suggested, it is a good question to ask when trying to figure out how to generate innovation in the legal industry. So the second part of the question, I think it relates to, in the sense, when there are already software companies that do the same thing, why do people then hire a lawyer? So then this actually brings us to, I think, stage 3 of the design thinking process, where you look at existing solutions and figure out, what's not good enough with existing solutions, or what's lacking with the existing solutions in terms of addressing exactly what is it that people really need. So, I mean, I don't fully know the answer to why people prefer lawyers when they are software companies. The thing is, it's hard to make a generalization because it really does depend on, are you talking about contracts? Are you talking about litigation? There are many factors involved in terms of, is it even allowed in terms of regulation? But I think if you see from a business model perspective, if you see that there's something that's cheaper, something that's better, but it's not being used, this is a good sign to suspect that there's some other issue, right? If you think that there's not a problem with price, not a problem with the product, you might think might be an issue with the promotion of it, might be an issue with the placement, the other go-to concepts in marketing and marketing theory that some of you might be familiar with. So I think my point is, a lot of these questions that we have now, there are ways to think about them and find answers to them if we look outside of just legal literature and consider how people in other industries are thinking about solving some of these questions. And that could be very helpful.
Okay,
Yep.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Hope that answers your question.
Great. So guys, is any other one has any further question? Please go ahead and put it in the chat. Or if there are no further questions, well, then we can say it's a wrap. And well, thank you guys a lot. It's this was actually an experiment that we tried first with Dan Lina when he came in now in January, but now again with the situation, I think we're going to do this way more often. I really appreciate your time, and to the people that were during the whole conference. Thank you a lot. If you can just write any comment or review on the link that I just shared you on LinkedIn, it will really mean the world to us, so we can continue doing this. And thanks a lot, guys. Thanks a lot. And well, if there's any other further question, guys, well, we'll see you on our next Tech Talk. We are still working with a lot of really cool guys for us speaker. Daniel Katz, Daniel Rodriguez, the former dean from Northwestern, is also there. And well, actually, Jerrold, if in case we can share the PDF or the slides, I can share it with our contact base. So if people are interested in follow your work, well, you can also follow him on LinkedIn or Twitter, and Brian also. So excellent. All right, guys, thanks a lot, and I'll see you on our next Tech Talk. Take care. See ya.